has never been a reason to devalue them as a human being, and I don't think that there's any difference between that difference in environment and us compared to someone who's in the womb. And the fourth and final way that I'm going to talk about our differences compared to those in the womb is degree of dependency. An infant in the womb is obviously much more dependent on its mother than I am, for instance. I just moved out. I'm at college now, and even compared to how dependent I was on Mom, 3 months ago, I'm a lot less dependent on her now. And an unborn child is wholly and completely dependent on its mother. And going back to my six-year-old sister, I've gone back a few times, but she's definitely more dependent on my parents than I would be. And this is no reason to assume that she's any less valuable. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. There are differences, granted, between someone who has been born and is living in the world outside the womb and an unborn child who's still in the womb. But there, as I've just kind of demonstrated, there's no reason to assume these differences can take away from that child's value as a human being.
Very good. The whole question of a lot of time people are justifying abortion because of the financial inability of the person having the child to provide a good life for that child. And if that was the case, probably every child in India would be killed.
Right.
Because they don't have the financial wherewithal to provide them, quote unquote, a good life. So that whole thing is shot. But I'd like to bring up a couple other points that are really neat that are happening in law today with regard to unborn victims of Violence Act. That's Lacey and Connor's law, that was brought into law in 2004. And that law states, it's a federal law, that if you murder someone or cause the child to be lost of someone through the commission of any of 60 listed federal crimes, that you can be tried for murder, because it defines the child in utero as a member of the species Homo sapien. And I know this is a word used by evolutionists, but it's a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who carries in the womb. So from the moment of conception, if someone causes a person or a woman to lose a child, and through the commission of a crime, they can be tried for murder. In fact, that is what the husband of Lacey and Connor was charged with, and he was convicted of murder in both counts of this child. Now this whole question comes up into my mind. Now, how is Roe versus Wade, which allows abortion, saying that the child is not a human being, it's just a mass of tissue, and then this law states that it is a child, that it is at any stage of development a child in the womb, a human being in the womb, and then we have that dichotomy in our law. So what I'd like to see is someday somebody bring a challenge against Roe versus Wade with regard to this law, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, that clearly defines a child at any stage of development in the womb as a human. So I think that's just an interest. What do you think about that law?
Well, you know what? I think our society today is definitely confused, and on many issues chooses kind of a position of ignorant bliss. You know what? I'm not sure if it's a child or not. I prefer not to think about that. Basically because the consequence is, if it is a child, they really don't want to think about, the gravity of what's happening today to many unborn children. And I think that, those laws are definitely contradictory. And because of those laws, it's basically up to the mother to decide whether it's a child or not. In essence, that's what they're saying. Well, if the mother wants the baby, then it is a child. And if she doesn't want it, then it's just a mass of tissue. And I think that that's definitely very incoherent thinking, but that's sadly kind of where we are today.
Yeah. This whole Roe versus Wade thing came about many decades before it was finally codified in the laws of our nation due to an edict issued by a few people on a court. there was a movement called eugenics movement that started long before Roe versus Wade was made law, and that eugenics movement basically stated that certain people who are undesirable to society should be killed or allowed to die, and or sterilized. And a lot of people in mental institutions were killed. Anyone with any kind of defect at all was slated to be killed. And then Hitler's Germany obviously took this to the ultimate with the extermination of the Jews, because they were seen as undesirable, and homosexuals and Roman Catholics, anybody that believed differently than they believed, were slated for removal from the earth. And it's the exact same thing today with this Roe versus Wade and the killing of unborn children. Terrible thing, and it's something that should be addressed and brought to light. Okay, Definitely. Let's move on to liberal bias in the media.
Awesome. Another very, very fun subject. First of all, I want to start off by saying that I think it's near impossible to find a source of media these days that isn't biased in one way or another. I think the large majority of the media is biased liberally, and the section of the media that is not biased liberally, I think, feels the need to compensate sometimes and be a little more biased on the conservative side of things, just to compensate for the liberal bias. So I always have a very hard time finding, whether it's an article online or whether it's a TV program or a radio show, I always have a very hard time finding something where you really don't detect a whole lot of bias. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say that the media these days is definitely very liberally inclined. Just as an example, I've actually had some real experience with this. Back in, I believe it was February of this year, I had the opportunity to go down to Washington, D.C. and take part in the March for Life that happened down there. And it was a crazy scene. There were miles and miles of people marching, and basically as a testament to their pro-life ideals. And every so often, walking along, you might see one or two people who are holding signs that had pro-choice messages on them. But you'd see them. They're few and far between for sure. The vast majority of people there, 99.9% of the people who were, taking part in any sort of protest that day were on the pro-life side of the issue. And right. So I was down there and I was immersed in that. And then when I saw later, watching a TV program concerning the March for Life, the clips and the footage they chose to show on the program were just ridiculous. And it almost made it seem as if it was kind of a 50-50 split between the pro-life and the pro-choice side. And being down there and seeing everything firsthand, I knew that was completely, doctored and very, very biased. And so that was just one of the instances where I personally felt that bias. Yeah.
Yeah, we see that in so many ways. One of the things with regard to back to law again, because this show uses the Constitution and the amendments and the Bill of Rights and all that to justify and defend many of the Christian liberties that we've been given. One of the things in law is if you draw up a contract between two people and it's totally biased towards one person or one side of the parties, if you bring that contract before a judge, the judge is going to throw that contract out or rule in favor of the party that has been, their rights are pretty much been mitigated by the contract because it is unfair and biased. And if we had a judge that would judge the news coming out of most of the popular news outlets, CNN is one of the famous ones, and MSNBC, some of these other news organizations, they would say that their news is absolutely biased and unjust, and therefore would rule that what they're speaking about primarily is unfair to truth. It is not true what they're saying. What they're actually doing is lying by skewing and spinning the news that they're reporting.
Right. And I'm fully, just to clarify, I'm fully supportive of everyone's right to voice their own opinion and that sort of thing. But yeah, I agree with you. If those liberal news outlets choose to take a side on a certain issue, that's perfectly fine. But when they paint their side of the issue as if that side is wholly unbiased and true, that's what really gets me going a little bit.
Yeah, and I have the same issue with even Fox News. I know they spin a lot of stuff to the other extreme. I would just like, I used to like to listen to the McNeil-Lehrer report on PBS, and I think it's just the McNeil report or the Lehrer report. I can't remember which one now. One of them got done doing it. But it was very fair, very unbiased, although public television is mainly biased towards the liberal agenda. But this one show was very unbiased, and I really enjoyed watching it because of that fact. It just was a breath of fresh air to hear someone give both sides of an argument and just both sides of those arguments meeting in truth. Just want to point out something before we go on to the next topic, because I said I would do this on today's show. I went to Detroit this weekend. Into the inner cities of Detroit. We've heard how Detroit has gone bankrupt. And I went into Detroit and don't know anybody there. Just went into the worst parts of towns. I have pictures and videos of the burned out buildings and boarded up buildings, one right after another. In fact, you can go on to Google Earth and look in detail at the city of Highland Park, Detroit, which is a little town inside of Detroit. And you can go up and down the street and see burned out hulks of buildings, one right after another on those streets on Google Earth. So if you'd like to look at some evidence of what I'm talking about, you can do it there. But what I did was I didn't want my wife to stay down there because I was afraid for her safety. So I told her, look, just drop me off in Detroit, and I'll try to meet some people. You go somewhere else and somewhere safe, and wait for me, and then I'll give you a call to come back and get me. So she dropped me off, and I started walking up one of the side streets because I didn't want to stay on the main streets. I wanted to meet people, near their homes and in the neighborhoods. And I got to this one street called 2nd Street, and I heard some arguing going on, some loud voices, and I just said, hey, I'm going to go over there and see what's going on. I went over there and sat down. I just sat there where there was a group of people that were there and got to know them, got to talking about them and how the issues in Detroit's bankruptcy are affecting their lives. And the people were very open and very kind to us. And before I left, I was there 2 or 3 hours, and I met probably a dozen people in that period of time. They were wonderful to me, gracious to me, very kind. In fact, when my wife showed up, and I had given her a call to come on in and pick me up, when she showed up, they all hugged her and, thanked us for coming there that day and talking to them. And so I'd just like to give a shout out to the people in Detroit I met. I got all their phone contact information. I'll be featuring some of their discussions on a future show, but I just wanted to give a shout out to these people in Detroit. God bless each one of you, and let's move on to the next topic of evolution in public schools.
Sweet. Another one of my topics that I definitely I'm very passionate about. Speaking about essentially evolution to the at the point we are in time right now and in society, evolution has been completely, and when I say evolution, keep in mind I'm talking about the idea that macroevolution is occurs and is somehow proven by science. Microevolution is a different story, and if you'd like later on, I can make a distinction between the two. But when I generically refer to it as evolution, I'm referring to macroevolution. The point where we are in school and in society at this day and age, evolution is painted as fact, and as if it's somehow proven, and that I've seen creationists